And this one looks like a excellent choice if you are into deduction games, but you want something with a little bit more meat than something like Werewolf. But in this game, players are essentially playing on one of two teams, the cultists or the investigators. And the cultists will know who the other cultists are, but the investigators don't know who's on their team and who isn't, and they're going to have to use deduction to try and figure that out, except for one player who will be known as the Seer, who has complete information, but if the cultists are ever able to point out who the Seer is, then the investigators immediately lose. The cultists can also win the game by eliminating enough of the investigators, but the investigators win the game by either exposing the cultists or stopping the ritual by gathering all of the tomes from each of the rooms in the game. Unlike a lot of other deduction games, this one does actually have a spatial element to it, as players will be moving their characters through different rooms and taking various actions. Players can also say anything they want at any time, they just can never show their cards, and players can be dead or alive, but you always act alive until it's revealed that you're not. If it is revealed that you are a dead player, then you still continue to play the game, but you play it as a ghost, which is going to limit some of the actions that you can take, but it also gives you some other advantages as well. After the board's set up according to the scenario, players are going to be taking turns performing their actions on their turn, but at the start of the round, every player is going to be able to perform a movement action, and then there's going to be an event card drawn. And if you're ever in a room with one other player, meaning that there's just two players in a room, no witnesses, then each of the players are going to be choosing a dead or alive card from their hand and putting it down in front of the other player. The thing here is that the investigators only have alive cards, whereas the cultists have both dead and alive cards in their hand, which means that if these do get revealed at some point in the future and you discover that there is a dead card in that stack, then it's most likely that one of the characters that gave you a card is a cultist. The reason that I say it's most likely that one of them is the cultist and not for sure is because each player does also start with one card already in the stack, so you might already be a ghost at the start of the game without even knowing it. If there's more than two people in a room, then this doesn't happen unless the lights also happen to be turned off, and in that case, every player is going to be giving every other player a dead or alive card in the same manner, and there's different events and actions that can be taken in order to cut or reinitiate the power into the mansion. These events can also have some other effects like opening up new actions and possibilities to the players, or even opening up different pathways for players to move through different sections of the mansion a little bit easier. But after all the players have performed their movement and the event card's been drawn, each player is then going to be able to take turns performing one action. And one of the actions that you can perform is to check if another player is alive or dead. Whenever you do that, you're going to be looking at the stack of cards in front of them. And then if there is any dead cards in that stack, then that player is dead. And if you're an investigator, you have to reveal this truthfully to everyone at the table, and then that player will become a ghost. But if you're a cultist, you are allowed to lie about this and allow all the players at the table to continue playing, believing that that player is still alive. Anytime that a player is revealed to be dead, players are each going to have a blind vote where you're going to be closing your eyes and then pointing at someone that you want to eliminate from the game. You are also allowed to withhold your vote and not point at anyone, but if enough people are pointing at a particular player, then that player is eliminated. But some of the other actions you can perform is your character-specific action, or alternatively the room action, because each room is going to have a different action associated with it, and you can just go ahead and perform that action, but there are some other actions that you can perform when you are in a room as well, and these apply to all of the rooms in the game. Because like I said, it's the investigator's goal to try and collect each of the tomes from each of the different rooms in order to try and stop the ritual of the cultists. But in order to do that, you need to fully explore the room and then succeed in finding the tome. And the way that this works is that in order for a room to be considered fully explored is for that stack of cards associated with that room to have 3 cards in it. In order to make that happen, when a player is in a room, they can perform the action to add a card to that stack. And if you are an investigator, you're only going to be adding success cards to that stack. But if you're a cultist, you can add other cards like failures or even a sabotage. But But regardless of which cards and who's adding them to the stack, once that stack gets to 3 cards, then players can try to succeed in finding the tome. And the way that that works is that you're going to be performing an action to do this. You're going to be taking the stack of cards associated with that room, shuffling it up, and then drawing one of those cards. And if it's a success, then you're going to be taking that room's tome and adding it to your library. But if it's a failure, then you're going to be doing nothing. But if it's a sabotage, you're actually going to be taking one of the tomes out of your library and putting it back into one of the rooms. So I think you can start to see how the deduction comes into play, with the cultists being the only ones able to use death cards, as well as sabotage and failure cards. So as those start appearing in different decks in the game, this is going to start making players suspect which other players might be a cultist. Of course, that is easier said than done, because the cultists can also act like they're an investigator because they do have access to those cards as well. But the game continues like this until one of those win conditions are met, and then that team wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, definitely check it out. I'll have it linked in the description below.